The calabash shattered against the earth, its fragments scattering like pieces of a broken spell. The sound echoed through the still air, sharp and final. For a moment, Zarah stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. She stared at the broken shards, her hands trembling. Something was supposed to happen. Jabari should have collapsed. His life force should have drained, just as he had said. In a village cradled between mountains and a mighty river, lived Jabari, a man whose wisdom was spoken of in hushed tones, whose composure was a mystery even to those who knew him well. He was a simple man, a farmer who worked the land, but it was his unwavering calm that set him apart. Once, Jabari had loved and lost. His first wife had been taken by illness, leaving him adrift in grief for years. But time had a way of mending even the deepest wounds, and in his later years, he found love again in Zarah, a young woman from a neighboring village whose beauty was only matched by the fire in her spirit. Their wedding was a grand affair, filled with drumming, singing, and the joy of a village coming together. Zarah danced before her husband, her eyes filled with the promise of love and devotion. Yet beneath the surface of their union, a quiet question lingered in her mind. Why was Jabari so unshaken by the trials of life? Unlike the other farmers, he did not fret over the rains or the harvest. He did not argue over money or worry over misfortune. Even in the face of loss, he remained composed, untouched by the storms that unraveled other men. The villagers whispered that Jabari carried a secret, one that gave him his strength, one he had never shared with anyone. And Zarah, ever curious, was determined to uncover it. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting their home in hues of gold, she sat beside him, her voice gentle but insistent. Jabari, she began, I need to ask you something. He glanced at her, sensing the weight behind her words. You are never troubled by anything. The people say you carry a secret. What is it? Jabari sighed, his expression unreadable. He had always known this moment would come. Come, he said, rising from his seat and gesturing for her to follow. She walked with him to the back of their home, where a towering iroko tree stood, its branches stretching toward the sky. Hanging from one of its limbs was a calabash, worn with time, etched with intricate carvings, yet holding an almost otherworldly presence. This, Jabari said, his voice steady, is the secret of my life. Zarah frowned. As long as this calabash remains whole, I will live. But the day it is broken, my life will end. The words settled between them like a gathering storm. Zarah's heart pounded. She had heard of charms, of objects imbued with power, but she never imagined her husband carried such a burden. A mixture of awe and fear took root in her chest. Jabari's voice softened. But with this knowledge comes responsibility. I trust you with my life, Zarah. She nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the calabash. Days passed, but something had shifted within her. The knowledge of the calabash became a whisper in her thoughts, growing louder with each passing day. A strange power tingled at her fingertips, a knowledge that she, and she alone, controlled Jabari's fate. At first, it was only a thought, a fleeting temptation. Then, one afternoon, after a quarrel over something trivial, her anger got the best of her. Storming to the back of the house, she stood beneath the iroko tree, her chest heaving, her fist clenched. She reached up, her fingers curling around the calabash. Jabari, she called, her voice sharp with fury. He appeared almost instantly, his eyes widening when he saw what she held in her hands. Zarah, he said, his voice careful, controlled. Put it down. But for the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something raw. Fear. A thrill rushed through her veins. She had never seen Jabari vulnerable. Never seen him at her mercy. Promise me, she hissed, tightening her grip, that you will listen to me. That you will stop treating me like a child. Jabari's chest rose and fell. I promise, he said. Only then did she return the calabash to its place. But the seed had been planted. Whenever she felt wronged, she would go to the calabash. Each time, Jabari would rush to her, his voice filled with urgency, his calm breaking at the edges. The calabash became her weapon, and she wielded it without hesitation. Their marriage, once built on love, became a game of control. Jabari grew distant. Zarah grew reckless. Until, one day, she went too far. It had started as a small disagreement, something about money, something insignificant. But her temper flared, and before she could stop herself, she grabbed the calabash and hurled it to the ground. The sound of its shattering filled the air. Jabari did not fall. He did not gasp for breath. He only watched. Zarah's breath came in short gasps as she stared at the broken pieces. Confusion twisted inside her. "You're not dead." Jabari shook his head, that same sad smile on his lips. "The calabash was never my life force, Zarah." Her knees weakened. "But, you said." "I said it was a secret," he interrupted, his voice quiet. A test. A test she had failed. She had been entrusted with something sacred, and instead of protecting it, she had used it as a weapon. Every time she had threatened to break it, she had chosen power over love, control over trust. Jabari exhaled deeply. "I wanted to see if you would safeguard what you believed to be my life. Instead, you held it over me." Zarah's throat tightened, regret crashing into her like a tidal wave. "Jabari, He raised a hand, stopping her. "Love is not about control, Zarah. It is about trust. I gave you mine. And you shattered it." The silence that followed was heavier than any words that could be spoken. From that day on, their marriage changed. Jabari forgave her, but something between them had been broken, something no apology could mend. And in the quiet corners of their home, where the shattered calabash once lay, Zarah learned the harshest lesson of all. True love cannot be held through fear. It is only as strong as the trust that binds it. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Zarah moved through their home like a shadow, the weight of her actions pressing down on her chest. She wanted to speak, to explain, to take it all back, but how could she? How do you unbreak something that has already shattered? Jabari carried on as if nothing had happened. He still walked the fields, still spoke with the villagers, still sat beneath the iroko tree in the evenings. But something had changed. Before, when he looked at her, his eyes held warmth. Now, they held distance. It was not anger, not resentment, just distance. And that was far worse. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, she approached him as he sat outside, sharpening a blade for the next day's harvest. "Jabari." He did not look up. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I am sorry." The scraping of the blade against the whetstone continued. "I know," he said after a long pause. The words should have comforted her, but they didn't. Because his voice was empty. Zarah dropped to her knees before him, tears welling in her eyes. "I was wrong," she whispered. "I was reckless. I wanted control, but I didn't realize what I was losing in the process. I never meant to hurt you." For the first time in days, he looked at her. "You didn't just hurt me, Zarah," he said quietly. "You changed something between us." She reached for his hand, but he did not move to take hers. "You say you never meant to hurt me, but you did. Every time you held that calabash over me, you chose power over love, control over trust. And I let you. Because I loved you." Her chest ached. "But now," he continued, "I see that love cannot survive where there is fear. I see that trust is more fragile than even that calabash." Zarah wiped at her tears. "Then tell me what to do." Tell me how to fix this. Jabari studied her, his expression unreadable. You cannot fix trust with words, Zarah. Only time. She nodded, even though his answer frightened her. Because time did not promise forgiveness. It did not promise healing. It only promised distance. A love that could not return. Zarah worked tirelessly to mend what she had broken. She was patient. Gentle. She no longer spoke in sharp tones, no longer let her temper flare unchecked. She showed Jabari her remorse not through words, but through her actions. And still, the distance remained. Jabari was kind to her, but kindness was not love. He shared meals with her, but he no longer reached for her hand when they ate. He spoke with her, but only about necessities, never about his thoughts, his worries, his joys. The intimacy between them had withered, and no matter how much she tried to breathe life into it, it would not return. One day, as they sat in the shade of the iroko tree, Zarah turned to him, her voice soft. Do you still love me, Jabari? He was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he said, I will always care for you, Zarah. The words sent a sharp pain through her chest. Not I love you. Not I forgive you. Just I will always care for you. She realized then that some things, once broken, can never be made whole again. She had not just broken the calabash. She had broken them. The final lesson. Months passed. One morning, Jabari rose early and packed a small bag. Zarah watched him from the doorway, dread curling in her stomach. Where are you going? She asked, her voice laced with fear. He turned to her, his expression calm. The planting season is ending. I am traveling to my brother's village to help with his fields. She searched his face, desperate for reassurance. When will you return? Jabari smiled, but it was not the smile she once knew. In time. And with that, he walked away. Zarah stood there long after he had disappeared down the road. She knew then that he was not just leaving for his brother's village. He was leaving her. Not in anger. Not in punishment. But because trust, once shattered, cannot always be rebuilt. And love, once lost, does not always find its way back. The wisdom of the iroko tree. Years later, the village still talks of Jabari and Zarah. Some said he returned after many years, that he and Zarah found peace in separate lives. Others said he never returned at all. But all agreed on one thing. The calabash had never been the secret of Jabari's life. The true secret had always been trust. And once it was broken, nothing, not time, not love, not even regret, could ever make it whole again.